A vote for Trump means your groceries will be cheaper. So many people mention, I go in, so many people mention groceries, that beautiful but simple word, groceries. Sir, my groceries. You don't think of it that way, but that's what they mention more than anything, my groceries. That means we're going down and getting gasoline below $2 a gallon, bring down the price of everything from electricity rates to groceries, airfares, and housing costs. Young people will be able to buy a home again and be a part of the American dream. We will eliminate regulations that drive up housing costs with the goal of cutting the cost of a new home in half. We think we can do that. But here's a promise I'm making to you. I will cut your energy and electricity prices in half, 50%, 5-0, within 12 months of taking the oath of office. Within 12 months of taking the oath of office, I will cut your energy prices by 50%, and it's not going to be hard.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Zero Distortion. You just heard it yourself. That was Donald Trump promising to cut costs. Not eventually, not years down the road, but day one. The reality? Costs have gone the other direction. Gas isn't under $2. Groceries are more expensive. Housing is less affordable. Electricity prices are up. And then you have tariffs driving prices even higher. So today we're starting a new series where we dig into politics head on, because it's shaping our lives now more than any time in my lifetime. And I've got Jade Davis here with me to help break it down. Jade is the co-founder and chief strategy officer of Thornton Buckeye Group. He's a seasoned government affairs strategist and a public affairs executive with nearly 2 decades of experience navigating energy, transportation, and regulatory policy. He's led high-stake negotiations, crafted legislative strategies, and advised corporations and civic leaders on how policy and politics directly shape their bottom line. In short, he knows his space inside and out. But quick ask before we dive in. Hit subscribe. If you're tired of spin and want the real story, this is a place to be. Now let's get into it. Jade, welcome to Zero Distortion and the first of our political discussion series. Great to have you here.
Glad to be here, Russ. Glad to join the Zero Distortion family and get a chance to get in front of your viewers and just share a little bit of what I know.
Well, you know quite a bit. You've been in the space for a long time. And we're starting this series off with some political promises that were made by our president that we're going to talk about. Are we getting there or are we not? I mean, a lot of voters, Jade, I think they pulled that lever for lower costs, right? They were looking at the economy, looking at pocketbooks, coming out of COVID with a lot of inflation and everything going through that experience. But it seems like they're getting squeezed a bit harder. So really, before we get into the specifics, because we're going to break some of these things down, I mean, what's your overall thought on the promises made by Trump and what we're actually seeing today? What are we, almost nine months or so into his presidency?
Yeah, I when over the last, because, look, President Trump did not stop campaigning after the 2020 election. Okay, so we've heard, we got a chance. We have a running menu of promises, ideas, questions, back and forths, flips and flops. So I think when you look at a lot of the statements that were made in 2024, specifically about gas prices, about lowering groceries, electricity prices, I think those questions were not to the more policy involved folks like you and I and energy and various other things. I do not think those statements were made to draw in folks that are working on these issues on a day-to-day basis. I think those statements were drawn in to highlight to the public at large, but to people who were dealing with the impacts of post-COVID inflation, to folks that were dealing with the impact of feeling like they're locked out of the housing market, for folks that are looking at who were dealing with the day-to-day reality of higher food bills. And again, we're not talking about folks that was necessarily at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, dealing with, you know, higher kombucha, right? We're talking about higher bread, milk, rice, eggs, all these kind of things. Um, and I think he was speaking to those anxieties, those fears in general, writ large. And
Yeah.
those statements were made to identify to those voters and to those interest groups that are working and engaging those voters. And I understand this issue. I get it. Now, in reality, the president has very, very, very little impact on food and gas prices, other than you know, the president can go and release a couple billion barrels of oil of strategic reserve and bring it down for a few days, but that's an international commodity that's based on supply and demand and all these kind of things, right? And then also refinery schedules and shut down startup and maintenance schedules and things of those nature. The average person that is having a hard time filling up their tank has no understanding of that, doesn't care about that. They're just thinking like, I filled it up for $35 last week and it's $51 this week. That is a problem.
Yeah.
That is, you know, I think that's what he was speaking to. I think that is the larger, and he's not the only one. Every level of government, left or right, in the middle, you have everybody from mayors saying that they're gonna you know, create more jobs, and governors saying that they're gonna rein in healthcare costs, and they actually can't do that.
Yeah.
Because one, they may not have jurisdiction, uh, and two, it's a lot more complex than saying, I just want to do it. You need a legislature and a Congress or a county council or a city council to go along with you. You need courts to line up, and you also need industry to buy in. And
Yeah.
that is the reality, I think, in which a lot of voters may understand, but they're voting on how they feel. And the cultural issues, I think, line up on those same things as well. There's nuances in everything, and those nuances oftentimes are boiled down to 30-second sound bites that I'm going to lower electricity by 50% within a year, when electricity is almost always priced based on two things outside of supply and demand, which drives everything in our economy. There's the regulatory um, um, hurdles of, you need at least this amount of power, and this amount of power has to be produced at the baseline. Once you get outside of that, it's all driven by regional economics of available power and how many power plants and how big these plants are to produce it. And also we get down to states um, deciding, like, there's a generation price, then there's a distribution price, and what riders are we going to have on generation and distribution, and then add in transmission, and what kind of rate of return are we going to get? Are you dealing with a municipal or co-op? There was all these kind of things. So
A lot of
I said all that to say, is that as a person who, you know, who works in government affairs and deal with all these issues at a very granular level sometimes, and sometimes at a very 100,000-foot level in a macro economy, um, he did not say anything or do any act in a way that's sort of outside the political norm here in America. And I think that's what I think most Americans have to understand, that sometimes people tell you what you want to hear, and
Yeah.
until you ask how and why, you're not going to get down to it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Politicians are not known to be the most honest folks, right? Whether it's left, right, center, that they say a lot of things. The intention may be there, but the follow through something else. So, well, let's break down some of these promises that Trump made on the campaign trail.
And
just
real
some
quick,
of
Russ,
those.
real quick, I think we got to ask a question too. Do voters want honesty, or do they want results? Because honesty doesn't make that gas tank bill go from 51 bucks back down to 35.
Right.
The
Right.
results do. Or anything that they feel others can do, are in charge, quote unquote, to lower that. I think that's the for those
That's
of
a
us
question
who
to
are,
ask. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It
that's the
matters.
question.
Yeah, I think honesty, everybody, I don't want to be lied to, right? If a politician says, "Hey, I know gas prices are high. We're going to do what we can to bring them down." That's one thing, and as long as they follow through on trying to do that. But like you said, most don't. They're going to make promises, and like gas. Let me look at some of these receipts here because I brought the receipts to this one.
Bring the receipts out.
I got him. He made the claim, Trump did, that gas. He's saying this now that gas is under $2 in many states. I mean, if you drive it all and fill up, this is really nonsense. No one's seeing that. Have you seen gas under $2?
No, I've been around the country a little bit this year. Not all 50 states, but probably 10 to 12, and I haven't seen that.
I was in Virginia. I drove up from Florida this week. I flew down. My wife and I did, and we took a road trip back. Rented a vehicle. Usually we're driving EV, but we rented a vehicle and it was gas, and so that's the first time I had to fill up in a long time. And the cheapest gas I saw was $2.77 in Virginia. Then got back in Northeast Ohio and it was $3.35 or whatever whenever I was filling up to take that rental back. So there's places where it's cheaper, but I'm looking here at what the average, and this is national averages, for the US. In January 2025, the average was $3.10 a gallon, $3.10 a gallon. In September, it's at $3.14. So it's up a little bit. It's not crazy up, but it's certainly not under $2. So that's from AAA fuel prices, automotive fleet, and some of those folks with the receipts. So it's not under $2, which he said. I've heard him say that multiple times, and he said on the campaign trail he'd bring it down. But I mean, the cheapest state that they're showing is like $2.70, so I could believe it's $2.70 somewhere, which is cheaper than $3.10, at the beginning of the year when he took office. But that's not the norm, and it's certainly not under $2.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. Again, I think that $2 thing is. I remember when gas first went up to $2. I was a much younger man at that point, and I remember it was like calamity. It was like something has to be done. We have to. Oh my goodness! Like, I also remember when I first started driving and gas was most times 93 cents a gallon. Back when you could buy economy gas. Remember that? 86.
Yep.
You could buy the economy gas, and that was definitely always under $1. And premium would be like 110, 115.
Yeah.
For
I never grabbed down
on the. Yeah, I didn't either. I didn't either back then. I do now, but that's a whole nother question. But just stand on the 87 regular gas. I think again with what he was saying and he was hearkening to, and I would suggest that political campaign political strategists pay attention to is he was speaking directly to the anxieties of a lot of voters in that space. Now, do I agree with it? No. But I get it. And I think, like for some of those voters, somebody actually getting it and somebody actually stating it and saying give them the wishful thinking might have been all some of them wanted.
Yeah, there was a huge round of applause at the rallies, right? We played one of the clips. I think it was on the gas where everybody's, oh yeah, $2 gasoline. Sure, that sounds great. Not where we're at. Let's look at another one. Groceries. We're hearing a big one. We played the groceries clip earlier, and your grocery cart didn't get cheaper. If you're paying about the same, wow, you're doing really good because prices are going up. It's showing it's roughly about 2.2% increase since January. Dining out, if you're going out to eat, I've noticed that we pulled back a little bit on dining out, but that's almost 4% increase since January. So There's a lot of talk about eggs, right? I I didn't blame that on Biden. That was the avian flu.
Yeah, you get flu. Yeah.
And I can't give Trump credit for that. I didn't hold it against Biden. I wasn't holding that against Trump. That wasn't anybody's fault, that any politician's fault. But he's claiming I brought egg prices down, which egg prices I think are down a bit. So there's that. But meats, dairy, sugars up. Yeah, that's another one. This is information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So maybe somebody's going to get fired there if they see this one that we're using their numbers. But yeah, we're hearing a lot about the cost of
You point out another revision there, because someone will get fired for that revision. Really quick. Don't talk about those groceries.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, with the grocery thing, I think it was something very visceral for a lot of people in their sense of security.
Yeah.
Especially coming out of COVID. And I think that's why it resonated. I'm here in Cleveland, and I remember driving into work that first 2-3 weeks that the everything was sort of shut down. And we were at that point, it was like, okay, a couple of us can come into the office at this time, and you stay over here, you stay over there, you yellow cross, all these kind of things. Wild times 5 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
And I remember going down, and they had the food bank set up in the Muni lot where the Browns tailgates are.
Uh-huh.
And I saw this traffic on going out to Route 2 in both directions. And I'm like, why is it all this traffic? Who the heck else is downtown? And it was lines to get food.
Really?
And I'm talking about at least a half mile in both directions of traffic. Not to mention, these cars are already snaking through the Muni lot to pick up food, right? And that was 2 or 3 weeks in. And so when it was so disheartening, I stopped taking that direction when I did go into office, just so I wouldn't be able to see. because it was kind of jarring that this many people needed help in what at that point was a week or two disruption at that point that ended up becoming a massive disruption. But I don't think in that first week or two we fully understood what we were gonna go through for the next year or two.
Yeah.
And I think groceries was such because even if people weren't waiting in the food lines, they may have felt like they were one check away or one more shutdown away from being there, or had to help support people very close to them or neighbors and things like that, that may have needed that. And again, I think it really speaks to the gasoline in the same way, the groceries in the same way, speaks to people's sense of security or insecurity when it comes to these sort of macro breadbasket issues. I would argue, though, if last time gas went back below $2, we were in a Great Recession. And that was jarring in a whole nother way as well, and lasted longer.
Yeah.
And what we went through with the post-COVID inflation. So again, I'm kind of shocked that we haven't heard that kind of rebuttal to many of these kind of policy prescriptions. The trade-off was massive job loss and maybe a lost 5 years or half a decade or so of economic output, which is what we saw from 2008 to really 2013. By the time we were able to really start to come around the corner, if you look back at the data, versus the inflationary period, which hurt as well, on top of the death that came prior to that. And so I think those are kind of things I'm kind of shocked that wasn't, and maybe that's not the 30-second ad or clip that people want to remember and will take into the voting booth with them. But I think that was a juxtaposition of what we were seeing.
Yeah, those were tough times, no doubt, with the Great Recession and what we ran into with COVID. Here's a couple other ones. Housing. So in that clip, he said he was going to make it where young folks could buy houses, and 50% is his thing, I guess. He was going to cut them in half. This the median home cost in January, $397,000, and in July, $422,000. So at that, they're looking at 3.7% is what they're saying. And this is coming from the National Association of Realtors and Fred and that. So housing isn't more affordable. It's further out of reach. One that you and I could probably talk a little bit about is energy. So the utilities, electricity, you and I both know about that. He said he was going to cut that in half within 12 months of taking office. He says, I'm in January. Within 12 months, I'll cut electricity costs in half. So the national average is 16 cents per kilowatt hour. That was in January. It's 19 cents now. So that's from a few different sources here. But that bill, so much for cutting that in half. Americans are paying more every month, and we're going to continue to see more and more of that with the kneecapping of clean energy. I've mentioned this a few times. That's kneecapped, so that's not coming on the grid. You're also going to have these fossil fuel plants that it's going to be hard to build those out without the turbines, right? Steam turbines are needed for fossil fuel, for natural gas, for coal, and nuclear is a long ways off. Those are roughly 10 years. That's if you start today, right?
And get some really good permitting at all levels of government. You can get 10 years, and it's probably 10 years before you start digging.
Yeah, you don't snap your fingers and put this in, where clean energy is very deployable. It's a utility scale project with interconnection and all that. There's a lot of stuff in the queue that's going through that process, but the actual build, 6, 12, maybe 18 months, just depends on the size project. But they're not going for that. So what's that mean? The supply and demand you were talking about, the demand's going up with AI, with data centers, with all the electrification. But the supply, if it can hold steady, they're going to be doing pretty well. And steady, you won't cut it.
To be honest with you, going back to housing real quick, housing has never recovered, and we are now paying the price for the fallout of housing in 2008, 2009. That's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing. It never recovered. And at the federal level, we did a really good job of working on improving borrowing and how people borrow and what people can borrow and things like that to buy a house, while not kneecapping the market. What we never addressed was the lack of housing being built during the Great Recession and immediately following the Great Recession. We just never addressed it, and the incentives and the zoning at the local level never lined up to produce more housing. Plain and simple, whether that's apartments, single families, townhouses, condos, whatever. We just haven't built enough. Plain and simple, not enough to replace the things that came offline. And then you throw in some ultra low interest rates during the pandemic, where people who would have probably sold their home is now like, well, why should I now? And again, has nothing to do with what the president can do or can't do. This is more of a large scale industrial policy problem, or lack thereof. Energy, let's stay on energy for a while, Russ, because I think while that wasn't the most egregious statement of saying like, I'm gonna do this and not, I think when you look at why energy is pricing the way it is, how it's going up, I think this is such a complex issue. But the one thing that isn't complex is the least amount of lower amount of electrons you have, the higher the price is, because you have less supply. Plain and simple. So whatever we can do to create more supply, we should probably be looking at. Now, caveat here, even when you're producing more supply, does that mean making old plants run that run at at losses, that makes those new electrons that much more expensive. So we have to look at ways to deploy and build new electrons to get them on the energy grid, especially in places and spaces that they're needed. And so the kneecapping of green energy, considering that is the future, we're not going to go to Mars burning gas.
No.
We're not.
No.
We're not going to power bases on the moon. Running up. We're not going to build an oil pipeline up there. Okay.
Right.
We're not gonna, put, thousands of tons of coal and shoot them up there to the moon and try to combust it there. We're not going to do that. So all these things, alternative energy here, dealing with batteries, dealing with solar, dealing with wind, also integrating natural gas and pipeline availability and things like that for not only backup power and peak power, but some of our base load and things of that nature. Modular nuclear and what that looks like. I'm kind of shocked that there wasn't a $1 billion put into national laboratories just to deal with that.
I would support that.
And I'm looking like, well, that is the real economic development benefits that we can bring: jobs, investment, property valuations, property taxes, and things like that. We can bring to communities right now that we just decided not to as a public policy. I think that is something that Americans should ask questions of why.
And kind of carrying on with that a little bit, this is one thing that this particular president has affected is the electricity. So, the
prices are going to continue to go up the more and more we don't make these investments.
Right. So whenever you think of the big billionaire bill that went through, he signed off on that. Whenever he had these executive orders that further reduced what clean energy could be deployed. Whenever you think of this wind farm out on the East Coast, 80% done, it was going to start generating and feeding like 350,000 homes or something. It was 80% done, and they said, "Oh, full stop. We're putting the pause button on this." What's going to happen with that? Those are things that he directly affects, and it's a problem. Something else that we haven't hit yet. This is I'll say the last one is tariffs. So traditionally, tariffs are supposed to be part of what Congress decides on. Not in this administration. He's just kind of putting these on. I know there's lawsuits, all kind of things going, but I mean, that is costing. I think I'm looking here. There's one, Kiplinger Tax Foundation, the Budget Lab at Yale, AP News. They're saying just right now the average tariffs costs are adding like 18.6% more to what we're paying for, right? Compared to a year ago when those tariffs weren't in place. So that does hit the housing market, right? That's gonna hurt that. Appliances, cars, electric, like solar panels coming in, for example, transformers, any of these things for the grid itself that we were just talking about. I mean, that's I know Scott Besson says that the consumer doesn't pay for it, but I mean, he's just straight up lying. That's
news to
us. That's you and me paying for it. So that's additional cost. Overall, you add that in, these prices aren't going down. They're going up, right? So, go ahead.
To be honest with you, we're looking at billions and billions of dollars a month being collected now in tariffs, right?
Yeah.
The question I would ask is, where is that money going? Is that going into that Is that going into the spending on this robust energy solutions that we need to bring down prices? Is it going into any kind of incentives for home builders to build more homes or build more density in homes and help offset the prices of lumber and labor? Which, that will drive down the price of new homes at least. Uh, uh, is that going to food assistance to
Oh, they
help
cut
with
that,
those
right?
grocery bills? Yeah. Is it going to, are we getting gas cards in the mail or anything like that?
No,
uh,
it seems that they said it was going to help on. Well, I've heard a few things, but the tariffs were going to be bringing manufacturing jobs back. Right. This is probably a whole other pod that we could do, but bring manufacturing back.
yeah,
That's not happening. They're losing manufacturing jobs, so that's not working. I've heard that money is going to help to pay off the debt. Well, the big betrayal bill, that's the other thing I call it. The big betrayal bill that was passed, it's increasing the debt, right? So,
yeah,
I mean, it's not helping that. Where's that money going? I don't know. Simple economics tells me that money coming in, you're still spending more than you have coming in, so you're not balancing anything as far as the federal government. To your point, if it was going for things like that, that would be more of an investment into our nation. But
yeah.
I think that's a great question. Where are those dollars actually going?
Yeah, I think that's the question. Americans should export. I think that's Congress' role to figure that out. I'm still kind of awestruck that that is not the primary daily fight going on and figuring that out and reallocating these funds to where um, members in their districts and their states can bring home the bacon, for lack of a better term. I'm kind of all in awe of that, and I think that is the thing that which um, get not as politicals. I get it, where we're people who sort of wake up and we are in this space until we go to sleep. I'm
Yeah.
saying to Bob and Betty Buckeye, to uh, Marcus and Mary Michigander, to um, Rose and Carl in Arizona, um, ask those questions.
Yeah.
And I think that is where, we have to, as a public, and I hope folks are listening to this, are asking those questions like, okay, if this is where we're going to go with these kind of investments, what do we get out of this? And I think and not necessarily like he was never going to be able to lower electricity prices. He was never going to be able to lower gasoline prices. Those were campaign stump speech statements, and they polled well, and he said it. Got it. He's not the first or the last person running for president or dog catcher that is going to say that. Okay.
Yeah.
But what I think we have to do as those of us who are in business and are impacted by these kind of things, those of us who have jobs that are impacted by these kind of things, or those of us that go to the grocery store or go to the gas station or want to buy a home or refinance their home or get their kids into a home, what are we doing now that we made these decisions? How is this now benefiting us? And I think that is the question over the next 6 to 9 months that we need to be asking this administration as we go into midterms in 2026.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, the receipts, they don't lie, right? The gas
Yeah.
isn't to $2, he said.
Yeah.
Groceries aren't cheaper. Housing's not affordable. Electricity costs are up, and tariffs, they're just a hidden tax. And
Yeah.
voters, to your point, they asked for relief. What they got was really, it's been the exact opposite. It's not been a lower price in any of that. And 2026, I sense a lot of frustration. I hear a lot of frustration whenever I talk to people, whether it's on social media, you see it, or just talking to people out on the street. It's going to show up at the ballot box next year, or maybe those who voted for Trump won't show up at all. I mean, either way, I think 2026 is going to be a pretty big midterm. It always is, but it feels like this may be a little bit more. But Jade, a big thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate your insight. Where can people find you?
Thornton Buckeye Group, THORNTON, BuckeyeGroup.com. And then also Thornton Buckeye Group on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all those kind of things. Jade Davis as well on LinkedIn, JADE Davis. And so please, I'm just glad that you're having these discussions, Russ. Be welcome to come back anytime that you have time for us at TBG. And I'm definitely gonna have some of my clients and everything tune in to Zero Distortion.
Hey, thanks so much. Yeah, this is going to be a regular thing. We're definitely going to have you on as a regular guest. We really appreciate your knowledge and your insight and for taking the time. So thanks so much. And hey, if you want more Zero Distortion, we're unfiltered, we're fact driven, there's no spin. Hit that subscribe button, leave us a review, and share this episode. So trust me, this is just a start. Thanks again, Jade.
All right.